Hey, welcome to this live stream where we're going to be talking about a really important aspect of music, of playing the guitar, and that is strumming patterns. So much of the time, pretty much 99% of the time here, we talk about the specifics of music theory as it relates to the relationships between notes and intervals, chords, progressions, and all of that. And so the topic of technique isn't often touched on. Now, in the music theory course, I do talk about strum patterns and technique, but here we haven't really dived into that. So let's talk a bit about some strum patterns because it's really important. And as always, we're going to geek out about some of the philosophical aspects of strumming. How philosophical can it be? Well, let's check it out. So thanks for being on this one. In the US, we have Memorial Day, which is a holiday. So this is going to be, I think, a fun one. So let's look at it. So starting with the different aspects of playing the guitar, we have four main layers of music. And sometimes we'll talk about these four main layers. And this is a nice illustration that summarizes what those layers are and how you produce them, how you create these different layers in a song. So the rhythm is the bass layer. And when I say rhythm, I just mean the movement of the music through time. And much of the rhythm actually comes from this part of your body, which is the strumming hand. Now, in all of these examples that we're going to look at, we're assuming that you're a right-handed guitar player. So I'm going to talk about the left hand and the right hand. But of course, if you're left-handed, then you just do the mirror image of that. The same concepts apply. But because I'm right-handed, I'm going to look at this from the perspective of a right-handed player because it just makes sense for my brain. But the same ideas apply if you're a southpaw, as they say, a left-handed player. The next layer is the harmony, and the harmony is pretty much handled by the left hand. So we have the rhythm manages the right hand. The harmony is played by the left hand. That's the chord playing or the scale playing. In this case, the harmony is played by the chord playing hand on the fretboard. Then you have the melody. If you're just a one-man band and you're making music yourself, the melody could be played by different scales or different accompaniments that you play on the fretboard, but a lot of times it comes from the vocals, singing from the mouth, and then the lyrics are handled by the mouth as well. So the mouth is working double time while it handles the lyrics and the melody, while the left hand plays the harmony, the right hand plays the melody. Now, some of this might seem just self-evident that these different parts of your body are handling the different parts of a song, but I think it's worth mentioning because if you think about the old dexterity trick where you have, well, let me move the guitar for a sec. If you do the what is it, patting your head and rubbing your belly, that actually takes some coordination. I don't know how often you do that during the day, but the same basic idea applies when you're playing the guitar, which is one hand is doing one thing and it's making certain movements while the other hand is making other movements. And if you've been playing for a little while, you might take it for granted. But if you're new to the guitar, it's actually worth noting that it takes the kind of coordination that you would require to pat your head and rub your belly. So the right hand is handling the rhythm. This is propelling the music through time. Because when you get down to it, music is the intersection of space and time, in that time is rhythm or the progression of things in sequence. And then the harmony, or just the music itself, the pitches are pitches within musical space, the space of space-time. So the right hand, again, assuming I'm a right-handed player, which I am, the right hand is handling time while the left hand is handling space. And so you yourself as a guitar player are standing at the intersection of space and time, which we as humans are standing at the intersection of space and time. And music is a beautiful embodiment of that basic idea. And then, of course, the melody and the lyrics, as I just said, are handled by the mouth or the vocal cords. So I can play a progression with my left hand, and I'm making the music manifest itself into space and through time with my right hand. Okay, so like I said, we're going to get a little philosophical on some super basic concepts, but I have to say, no one ever explained it to me like this. And it's just assumed you strum and you play, and it's like you cut to the chase of just playing without actually thinking about what the hell am I doing playing the guitar. So I think it's helpful. So looking at these 4 layers, we have the 4 main layers of a song. Again, if you're just, accompanying your own music as you play. Now, like I say, the 2 parts, the 2 layers we're going to focus on here, not the melody and the lyrics, because that's the vocals. We're just going to focus on the hands, which again, the right hand focuses on the rhythm or handles the rhythm, the movement through time. And then the harmony is played by the left hand, or the part that manages the direction through space. So we have time and space. It's pretty far out, dude. You got to admit, I'm talking space and time. And so we're going to merge space and time with some examples. We're not just going to be pontificating about these abstractions. We're going to get into it. But one thing that is interesting that I have to note is that what's interesting is, if you're left-handed or right-handed, your handedness really dictates how you move through the world in a big way. If you're left-handed, you hold, say, a pencil or a pen in your left hand and you write, and it's your dominant hand. If you're right-handed, the reverse is true. It's your dominant hand. So the weird thing about the guitar, though, is even though I'm personally right-handed and my dominant hand is my right hand, my left hand handles most of the hard work in terms of, picking out the notes and moving through harmonic space. My left hand is kind of my dominant hand. Now, when it comes to finger picking and playing different rhythms, your right hand gets a lot more movement. But if we're just talking strumming, which we're going to be talking in this live stream, it's interesting how my right hand kind of takes a back seat in terms of the dexterity and the complexity that is required of it, while my left hand, my non-dominant hand in the real world, is kind of leading the show when it comes to all of the movement, which is kind of interesting. And it's not the thrust or the main point of this, but it is kind of interesting that the left hand, if your opposite non-dominant hand becomes the dominant hand on the guitar. Okay, so back to rhythm and harmony, or movement and direction with the 2 hands. Now, like I say, much of the time here, we focus on this hand because music theory, or the relationships between notes and intervals, all kind of occur with that left hand, or the hand that plays the harmony. But we're going to be giving this hand some love when it comes to this topic in terms of strumming and rhythm. Now, one of the things about music theory, or I should say music, is that a lot of times people think music theory is music notation. They conflate notation and theory. If you've been with us on any of these videos, you've seen that those two are not the same, that notation and theory are not one and the same. But notation does have some value because it too is at least an attempt, a medieval man-made, arbitrary, confusing attempt at showing the intersection between space and time. Now, we're going to be getting into the nerdery of all of that in some upcoming streams, talking about the pros and cons of music notation and how it really is an outmoded museum piece that should be largely discarded. That said, it does have some value in the way that it shows rhythm or time. It totally fails at showing pitch, and that's why it's so confusing for many people. but it does have some value when it comes to time. In terms of, and let's get into that. So if we look at the guitar, first just thinking about pitch, thinking about theory, like I say, we're going to get into this in way more detail. But this here is a guitar fretboard, and it's showing how these lines show how the various notes on the strings and frets correspond with note positions on the staff lines. Now, I get into this in way more detail in lesson 10 of the music theory course, which is about how notation works. And we're not going to get into all the details here, but you can see that it's like there's a lot to take in. And if we look at this, and like I say, we'll look at this in more detail another time, but there are certain relationships between the fretboard and notation that do make sense once you dive into it, but it is not intuitive, and it can cause more harm than good when it comes to trying to understand this stuff. So let's move past it and see that, okay, you can see how notation, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the fretboard and the staff lines. If we simplify the diagram here, the guitar is a little faded out on the screen maybe, but really what matters when it comes to theory in the left hand, we're still focusing on the left hand here before we get into strumming, is that there's a method to the madness, that instead of trying to rely on staff lines to understand the fretboard matrix, which is really this beautiful intersection between fundamental patterns, the circle of fifths and the chromatic scale, which I talk about in other videos, it's a lot to take in. Your left hand is doing a lot of the work. And because I'm a geek for music theory, I kind of like am finding myself even now talking about the beauty of the fretboard and not getting into the strumming. So I digress. Let's just get into some rhythms. Okay, so rhythm, the nice thing about music notation is that it is at least useful for showing a progression of a pattern through time. It mangles and confuses the issue when you're trying to understand the fretboard matrix and the relationship between the circle of fifths and the circle of thirds, which are two cyclical patterns that notation is ill-suited to illustrating, because notation itself is this rigid linear format. So it's not good for actually wrapping your head around how the fretboard works, but notation is helpful for at least showing a linear passage of a pattern through time on this row right here. Okay, so we're going to focus on the rhythm using notation. And if you're new to notation, there are some interesting symbols that are used, and we're just going to focus on the duration symbols, or the symbols of time, and really not all of them, just some basic ones like quarter notes, quarter rests. Actually, that's all that's in this diagram. And a quarter, if you think of a dollar, imagine that you have a dollar. You might already know this, but if you don't, it's worth mentioning that imagine each measure is a dollar, okay? So this is a dollar. I'm talking about the US currency here. So if you're not familiar with the US currency, you have a dollar, and then there are 4 quarters in a dollar. So you have a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, and a quarter. 4 quarters make a dollar. And so the quarter note is basically like you get 4 in 4/4 time here. You count 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in each measure. Okay. So that might not be groundbreaking information, but it is useful as we break apart this pattern. So the harmony, this is going to be our left hand. Again, if you're right-handed, and this is going to be our right hand. And we're going to focus mostly on the right hand. Okay. So, and in lesson 12 of the music theory course, there are lots of exercises. I actually have, I'll talk about this more later. There's a bonus exercises PDF that goes with lesson 12 that has 60 rhythms. So if you're struggling with, or just need to give your right hand some work to do and getting a feel for rhythm, then definitely check that out, because it has some useful information. So let's play the same harmony and a couple of exercises with different rhythms. And you'll notice that there is a difference between your left hand and your right hand. Your left hand is playing the harmony, while your right hand is playing the rhythm, and they're working two things at once. So before we get into the rhythm, let's just simply, I'm not even focusing on the rhythm here. So I'm not focusing on the duration symbols. I'm just focusing on the chords. And let's just play that a time or two, the chords. So we have a G chord. I'm not following the rhythm at all. We have a C chord. We have a C chord. Let's try that again. G, C, a D chord, and then back to G. So my right hand is just going with it, while my left hand is the focus. So G, C, D, G. Okay, so now that this hand has had some practice, let's have this hand kind of lead the way in terms of the rhythm. So we're going to just practice the rhythm. I'm just going to mute the left hand. We're going to practice getting the rhythm down. So we have 1, 2, 3, rest. 1, 2, 3, rest. 1, 2, 3, rest. 1, 2, 3, rest. This is a helpful exercise, or just this general way of dissecting a song if you're struggling with matching the two hands up, is just to give each hand the focus and then merge them together. It can be overwhelming, especially if you're a beginner, and this is especially helpful for beginners, is it can seem like too much for your hands to like try to do everything all at once. It can break your brain. So we've done G, C, D, and G, and we've done the rhythm of 1, 2, 3, rest, 1, 2, 3, rest, 1, 2, 3, rest. Now let's put them together. So we have G, rest, C, rest, D, rest, G, rest, and then we'll play it again. G, rest, C, rest, D, rest, G. So once I have my left hand and I have the chord positions down, my mind is really focusing on the rhythm to get a feel for the rhythm. Now, this is a super basic rhythm. I don't know that you'd even hear such a simple rhythm around a campfire, but maybe you would, especially if you're starting out, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to sound kind of chunky and blocky and basic to begin with, because we all start out that way. But once you get a feel for that, you can advance. So let's check out, we have this harmony. We're going to play the same harmony. In other words, our left hand already has the dance moves down, right? We've got a G, a C, a D, and a G. So this is a helpful exercise to get your chord playing hands familiar with the chords. And then now, again, much of the thinking, much of the focus is on the right hand. So now we're playing, again, the same harmony. Our left hand has the practice with these chords, and our right hand is going to stretch its own little brain in its own way. So now let's mute the chords and just practice this rhythm, right? So we have, this is in 4/4 time. So we have 1, 2, so it's 1, 2, and 3, rest, 1, 2, and 3, rest, 1, 2, and 3, rest, 1, 2, and 3, rest. So looking at these symbols, this little, what would you call that? Like a little arch looking symbol is a downstroke. And these are universal symbols. So you have a downstroke, so meaning I'm strumming away from my body, down. And then this little V symbol means an upstroke. So it's down, up, or to use the symbol terminology, it's like a little arch V, arch V, arch V, down, up, down, up. So in this example, we have a downstroke, a down, up, down, rest, or D-dud is what that would spell out. So we have down, down, up, down. So it's 1, it's down, down, up, down. So it's 1, 2, and 3, rest. 1, 2, and 3, rest. So just getting a feel for your right hand. If you're trying to do it all at once, you can trip over yourself. But Now that our left hand has already gotten a feel for that harmony, we don't have to think about it so much, and we can focus on the right hand and let's play it. So we've got a G, C, D, or G. Again, G, C, D, G. You have to admit, that does sound better than the first one. So the first harmony, or the first rhythm, was just super basic. Down, 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 rest, down, 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 rest, down, 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 rest, down, down. Just by throwing in this little upstroke, and these are eighth notes, this little bar right here in music just means that it's an and. We're hitting a down, down, and, or 1, 2, and 3, rest. So that little eighth note or that little up stroke does make it sound more interesting. So the campfire is starting to get more interesting, right, with these chords. So like I say, the 60 rhythms PDF that goes with lesson 12 gives you lots of practice. We're going to go through at least some of the rhythms here, but it's helpful to break things down in terms of your separate hands. Now we're going to switch things. So we're going to use your left hand is going to play different harmonies. So now this hand is going to move between different harmonies in these two examples, but the right hand is going to get a feel for the same rhythm. We're going to play the same rhythm in both of the next exercises. Okay. So we have, let's just focus on the left hand first. Outside of the rigid meter of time, we're not going to focus on time. We're just going to play, okay, we have G, get a feel for G. We have A minor, okay. We have a B minor chord, and then we have a C chord. So G, A, B minor, and C. Okay, so our left hand, getting a feel for that. Our right hand, fortunately, every measure has the same rhythm here, so we can kind of get in a groove. So we have, it's down, rest, down, end, or down, up, down. So down, rest, down, up, down. Down, rest, down, up, down. Down, rest, down, up, down. Okay, so that's the rhythm. I'm not taxing my brain by trying to play the left hand right now. I'm just getting a feel for the right hand. Okay, now I'm going to put the two together and play the chord progression. So it's with the rhythm. So it's G, and then A minor, B minor, C, and then it just repeats. And then I can just play that. So it's like, ooh, that's kind of nice. Rhythm and harmony combined, or movement and direction. So movement is the right hand, direction is your left hand. So movement through time and direction through space. And as you become the vortex, not the vortex, but the intersection between space and time, you experience the universe in one pinpoint of an experience. So let's go through a couple more. We're going to play the same rhythm. So the nice thing is our right hand already has this down. So it's down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. But the rhythm, or the harmony has changed. So our left hand is going to play an E minor. So outside of time, I'm just kind of getting a feel for my left hand. E minor to a C, to a D, to a G. Ooh, that's kind of nice. And that chord progression sounds nice. And then combined with the rhythm, it's going to start to get some more structure. It's going to sound like music because it is. So E minor, C, D, G. And then you can start playing around with that. Okay, so the two parts practiced separately and then combined is a beautiful thing. So like I say in the course, lesson 12 is called the layers of music, and it's in part 4. This is part 4, and it's about composition. So part 1, fundamentals, is about notes and intervals. Chords is part 2. Time, or dismantling notation so that you can make sense of it and transcend it into actual songwriting, leads to part 4, composition. And then part 5, improvisation, is what I'm actively working on right now. So lesson 12, definitely check that out. Let's look at what these symbols mean. We've looked at some of them already. So this little arch, I'm going to zoom in here. So this little, I call it an arch. I don't know what else you call it, a sideways bracket. It's a downstroke, so it's down. And much of your strumming is going to be a downstroke. And an upstroke, you have the upstroke, just what goes up must come down, and vice versa. The upstroke is a little less natural because you have to move in the opposite direction. So the downstroke is very common. Downstroke is super popular. As far as these symbols go, time signature, talk about that in lesson 10. This is a whole note. Now, these are a little bit different than regular duration symbols and traditional notation because we're not depicting pitch here. We're just showing rhythm. So these look a little bit different. Like this quarter note isn't showing any specific pitch. It's just representing a moment in time. So that's a quarter note. We have a half note here, which is similar to a quarter note with like a hole in the middle. A dot adds another half the value of whatever it dots. We can get into that in more detail another time. But we've got ties. Ties basically hold a note and extend it. So instead of playing 2 quarter notes, you play and then hold it for the second beat. We have these accents, mean like give it an extra emphasis. The upstroke we looked at already is represented by a little V symbol here. An 8th note can be shown by this little flag or by this beam if they're connected 8th notes and you play them in sequence. We have a rest, which there are different rest values, and then this bar line demarcates the different measures. So that's a super quick overview. I understand that's like super high level. We get into this in way more detail in the course, but just so you can make sense of some of the symbols we're going to look at here, here's another example. We're going to go through a couple more examples, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So this chord progression is, again, we're going to separate because it's helpful, especially when you're beginning to separate your left hand from your right hand. So left hand, let's focus on that first. So the chords are C, I'm just strumming outside of time, and then we have a G, and then an A minor, and then an F. That chord progression sounds really nice. And if we were to get into the theory of things, which I love and is my favorite part of music, we could call that a 1, a 5, a 6, and a 4, which you hear all the time in songs. But we're going to focus right now on the rhythm now that we have a feel for the chords, which again are C, G, A minor, and F. So the rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So I just played those 2 measures back to back twice. And so let's now combine the 2, and we have C, G. So whoa, it's kind of my brain has to like put the 2 together. I feel like I'm rubbing my belly and patting my head. So let's slow it down a little bit and get a feel for it. So it's C, G, A minor, and F. C, G, A minor, and F. And then once you get a feel for it, you can start to go faster or slower and get a groove. And just the rhythm is such an important part of songwriting, and I often overlook it because it's almost so simple, so basic. It's just this linear pattern that for me, it's much more engaging and fun to dive into the theory of things. The harmony, there's just so much more going on. But you can't overlook a good rhythm. Rhythm is super important. My favorite band, the Beatles, understood the importance because the beat is in their name. It's that important. So it's helpful to, every once in a while, really just kind of focus on the rhythm and allow it to influence the movement of a song through time. Because again, music is the convergence or the intersection of space and time. You can't just have space, you've got to have time ultimately. Let's play a couple more examples. This one is actually interesting because it lends itself to a little bit of theory and making sense of what goes on. So we've got, in this example, we're going to focus on or start with the chords, the harmony. So it's G, and then we have B, E minor, C. Okay, and this is a really simple one. This first rhythm, we're playing the same chords in 3 different examples, 3 different rhythms. The first one is just a half note to another half note. And then this doesn't make sense. Notice how you can't have a whole note that holds through the rest of the measure and not play the C. So in this example, we're not going to play the C. We're just going to end on the E minor, right? So as you start to get a feel for the convergence of space and time, you can see how some things are impossible. And this illustration is an example. So we have G, C, E minor, and then no C. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sounds kind of nice. If we move on to the next rhythm, playing those same chords, this C does come into play because it's not, a whole note. So we have G. So again, same rhythm. So we have a feel for the G, B, E minor, and C. So we have G. So let's just play the rhythm first. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So right hand knows what it's going to do. Left hand knows what it's going to do. Let's get them together. But you don't play the guitar like that. We play it like this. So it's 1, 2. Let's see. What is it? 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2. That actually starts to sound pretty cool because I think the rhythm and the harmony so far of all these examples is my favorite combo. So it's that's pretty cool. And if we were to say that this G, let's just divert into theory for a sec, because that's my favorite part. So let's look at the chord map and see that the G seems to be a one chord because it lands back on that G. So it's and then lands on G. So we have a G, we have a B. Okay, so the B is over here. It's a major 3. And then we have an E minor and a C. So basically, we're playing a 1, major 3, 6, and 4. So instead of that other example of a 1, 5, 6, 4, we went to this major 3. We've talked about this chord progression in another live stream before, but it's 1, 3, 6, 4, which is a really beautiful chord progression. One of my favorites, and some of the best songs are based on that chord progression. The chord progression, but then you can mix it up by adding, we could add different rhythms instead of the 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We could go 1, 2, let's see, 1, 2, 3, and like you can just do different rhythms. So once you get a feel for your left hand, play around with your right hand and see what the movement does. It's the same direction, but the movement can also affect your experience through the space and time of music. Okay, so there's more examples that I could go through, but we'll and I have some other points that I wanted to touch on, but we'll keep those for another time because we've been kind of covering a lot of different points. So the main takeaway is your left hand and your right hand serve different roles. They have different functions. The left hand really directs the harmony or the movement through musical space, and the right hand handles the rhythm. The direction through musical space is your left hand, and the movement through that musical space is your right hand. And so it's almost like, you know, if you were thinking of the guitar as a little boat, the left hand is kind of like the rudder. It moves you through harmonic space, and it directs where you're going, whereas the right hand is kind of the motor. If your right hand stops playing, you could, you know, try to play the chords without strumming, but it kind of stops. At the same time, if you're only focusing on the right hand, you're moving through musical space, but not really, like, you're not going anywhere. You're just kind of aimless. But when you combine the two, you have movement and direction, which is what music is all about. Okay, so some geeky stuff, some fundamental stuff. Yes, all true. So let's touch on some of the comments here and geek out a bit about some of this. Hey, Rodney, it's cool to have you on. Hey, Mike, if you have an unusual pick hold, please advise. So I don't know that I have an unusual pick hold, but, and I was in this, all of these examples, I was just using my my fingers to strum. But I don't have any specifics on that. I actually tend not to use a separate implement. I don't know. There's something about just picking it up and organically playing. But if you have any unusual pick holds, I'd be interested to know how you go about it. So not a whole lot of an answer on that one. So despite not using a pick, you get a very pick-like sound. That's interesting. So yeah, and I first started playing without a pick, and so I led that way. Actually, part of the reason that I don't use a pick, and maybe this isn't a real good reason, is I started on the bass guitar and played the bass probably for at least a couple of years before I even really got into guitar, like a 6-string guitar. And yes, I could use a pick on the bass, but I never did. Like I always played it, you know, like that. I never really got into slap bass. It was more just my fingers. And so I was used to that motion. And when I picked up a 6-string, just kind of used some of the same mechanical habits that I had. The bass guitar, though, I have to say, is beautiful. It's a helpful instrument to start on, because, you know, you're not really playing chords. You're just getting a feel for, you know, how the notes are laid out on the fretboard. And so once you get into guitar playing, you already kind of have a sense of where the notes are. Now, it's one thing to have a sense, like in your mind. It's another thing to have the literal sense in your eyes to be able to see the patterns. And so I'm excited these bass labels are just prototypes. Those are handmade that I did back in the day. And there will be bass labels coming up, but I'm ahead of myself because that's not the next thing on the list of to-dos. Rust, it's cool to see you on. So, hey, Mike, did you get to listen to, yeah, I actually did. Thank you for mentioning that. So the Devil is really good. Holler on Holler, or Holler for Holler, I think is what it's called. Is a really interesting one. He's very intense. So you brought him up in the context of, so for those of you who weren't on the open hour this last Saturday morning, we were talking about different songwriters and lyrics. And Rustolate, you mentioned Stephen Wilson, I think in the context of lyrics. He has some very interesting lyrics. So I would say check this guy out. He has some pretty dark storylines. The videos are pretty dark too. There's even a discretionary advisory notice on one of the videos because it's like gets in some interesting themes. And his use of words is super cool. Yeah, his lyrics are super cool, and he had a great line in The Devil, which was something like melting the golden rule, like as if the golden rule was a bar of gold, and melting it, meaning maybe people weren't living with integrity or something like that. It was a really kind of poetic, abstract way to make the point, which is really cool. So yeah, I did listen to some of it. It was really good. Thank you for recommending. And something to keep in mind in terms with the fingers, Rodney, is my brother-in-law. I don't know that he still does, but he used to grow his finger picking nails out. He used to get them done, actually. So he would go to like a nail salon, and this guy's a big guy, played football, so he could handle himself. So if anyone gave him a hard time, which I don't know if they ever did, for having his nails done in a salon, he could handle it physically to say, hey, stop mocking me. But he was totally into it. So he would get his finger picking nails done. Is that common? Are there anyone else here who go to the salon and have like well manicured fingernails for your picking hand? I used to actually file my nails all the time because I really fixated on my fingers playing the guitar, and I had the time and inclination to do it. I don't have either one now, but it was definitely a thing for me back in the day. The right hand, the left hand, they're both super important, and it is important to have good nail hygiene habits when it comes to that. So that is the gist of guitar strum patterns. There's, like I say, 60 rhythms to go through in lesson 12, and lots of exercises as well. So thanks for geeking out with me on this, and we'll be diving into some more music theory on the next one. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, night, morning, wherever you might be in the world, and we will talk real soon. Take care.